Sabers. Rice. Dosher. McCardle. Barrington. Allen.
Here.
Charts. Smith.
We have a quorum. Action to approve agreement 8/2019. There's no number after that. Is that intentional, Mr. Johnson? 33. Settlement agreement regarding 223 North Main Street. Mr. Johnson, you want to speak to this?
I'll just give you the brief overview. This would be what people refer to as the Crafty Fox building currently. We've had an order to correct issued on this property for a while now. Property owner hasn't been able to afford the remediation costs. The basic plan for this one would be they would essentially be giving the city the building free and clear of any encumbrances. We would be able to make any repairs to the building that we believe are necessary to take care of the nuisance conditions, which at this point would basically be replacement of windows and some tuck pointing. And then from that point, we're able to do with the property as we see fit, and the theory would be that we would recover our costs in an eventual sale of it. So that's the Cliff Notes version. If there's any questions, I can try to answer those.
Did we have any idea on the cost of the maintenance abatement, the windows, tuck pointing, other, and do we know the status of the roof condition?
I believe that the costs are projected to be somewhere in the $150,000 range for the windows and the brickwork. The roof, I don't remember when it was replaced, but I think it was about 7 years ago, so it should be in pretty decent shape.
It's not
yeah.
that old.
Okay.
That doesn't mean it's
Doesn't mean it's great, but at least it's not 35 years old. Okay, thank you.
Further discussion?
And I want to make sure, and I read through the agreement. The timing would be October 15th, and they'd have to be vacated by then or before then, or
Yeah.
how would the timing, if it goes through, would we try and start replacing windows right away? Do we have any idea what that timeline looks like?
Yeah, I think if we're going to be approving this agreement tonight, we'd probably look to put together some bid materials and bring those back to the council, possibly at the August 5th meeting, so at least you could get the ball rolling on that process. You could set the bid opening a little bit further out, and then you could decide from there whether to award the bid to be done, that late October or a little bit later into the winter. It's going to depend on contractor availability too. So.
And the October 15th, that's the date to be vacated?
Yeah, as of right now, we're setting it as October 15th. They're still, I think, a little up in the air on what they're looking to do. So the current business, current occupant. I don't know if they've made up their mind completely on whether they are interested in continuing in some fashion or looking to wind down business, or if they're looking to move to a different location. But we would, if they wanted to continue leasing and stay there for any period, it would take a further action by this council for them to be able to do that.
Do they feel that building's pretty structurally sound, or?
Yeah, I don't think that they have any concerns, and our city staff that have looked at it don't have any immediate concerns about the structural integrity of the building. It's more cosmetic issues.
Justin, has anyone appraised that building as completed, all the problems fixed, and we might put as much as 150? Could we sell it for 150? I mean, has it been a building in good shape like that right there? Have we gotten an opinion on what that building is worth?
No, I don't think that we are. I know that I haven't, and I'm not aware of any other city staff that has obtained, a projected appraisal.
I guess I haven't read the nuisance document, but did that take care of all of the issues as far as the windows and the tuck pointing, or were there others that needed to be addressed?
As far as the nuisance goes, it would mostly be those exterior items. We don't tend to do a lot of interior stuff with the nuisance code itself. So really, the only things that were identified in the order to correct were repair, replacement of windows, and the correction of the tuck pointing.
It would get rid of the plywood in the windows and the glass that's falling out.
Right.
That building's similar to the one to the east that's fallen down now, about the same size, isn't it, Justin? Very similar to it?
Are you,
To the
the
north.
Fennell building?
North of it, excuse me.
I think they'd be fairly similar in size, yeah.
Well, I
This
don't
building's
thi-
taller, isn't it? The Crafty Fox is a little bit, I think a story taller.
Or, I don't,
I guess I'm not sure.
I think that's
I
the tallest
think they're
building
about
on
the-
Main Street.
It might be, yeah. I'm not sure on the total heights, but they'd be pretty similar between.
and I just want to say this, so it's on record, I was asked by 3 different people today when they saw the headline in the Daily Republic of building for $1. Their immediate assumption was that it's the 3rd and Main
No.
building that we've been talking about for the past 6-8 months, and I just want to make sure this is a different building, and I believe it's 223.
Yep, yeah, this is
Um,
223.
And
It's a third main building.
It's the 3rd and Main building, but
It's
it's
the one
across,
south.
across the street to the
Across the street
south,
south.
the one we were talking about. So I just want to make sure we state that, even though we called it Crafty Fox and had the address in there, we're talking a building on 3rd and Main, and the perception of everybody that asked me about it was, how come you reverse course and are going back
Right.
on the other one? And this
301.
this is a different building.
Correct. 301 North Main is the building with the hole in it that we're trying to get resolved. But this is
Yes.
the building immediately south across the street. It's known as the old Western Building. White Drug was in there. Ben Franklin Crafts, now it's Crafty Fox.
Is the Crafty Fox the only entity that's in the building? Is it just that store? There's no one upstairs or any?
Yep, yeah, that's correct. They're the only occupant at this point.
Do we know, has anybody addressed the Historical Society's committee at this point of what we're potentially proposing would be acceptable?
That would still be a process we'd have to go through. I can't recall if we gave them any initial notice when we issued the order to correct or not, but the vast majority of that process, even if we did give them notice, we'd still need to go through the vast majority of that process.
I suggest we do what we need to and don't notify.
I wish it were that easy, John.
Well, I do know one thing, that I've had several people tell me that the 301 North Main building is not worth salvaging, but the one to the south is. It's a good-looking building. It just needs some, obviously, addressing.
Tender loving
Little
care.
tender loving care.
Not a little, a lot.
Yeah, and I don't know if any private individual is going to step forward and make the first step. And that's why I'm wondering, and John's referring to the fact of what we're looking at it as an investment to be able to utilize the building and maybe get somebody in there and start putting some money in so it's usable. Obviously, it's sat in this condition for years, and everybody pretty much agrees that it's in a condition now that it can still be salvaged, but in a few more years, it may not be. And if we put the windows and the tuck pointing, we're going to at least make it, we're going to shore up the outside and then try to work potentially with the development corp or whoever and see if we can get some occupants in there and who knows what exactly would be the use for it, but I know personally I was approached by somebody already that wanted to take a good look at it, and I understand another individual contacted the city today to get some more information. So it might be working already, but we won't know that unless we move forward and take control of the building and start to address the needs. And with that, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Smith, second by Mr. Allen. Further discussion?
Do we,
I just want to say thanks for bringing that point up too, because the agreement does allow the Christensen's to try to sell the building up through the date of the transfer, October 15th. But actually proceeding with that sale is going to require the city to sign off on it at some point. So if an excellent redevelopment opportunity presents itself over the next couple of months, we're still able to explore those. But this at least gives us something in place that we know for sure we can get it taken care of if we need to.
Justin, do we know what the present owner paid for that building and when?
Not off the top of my head. I couldn't tell you. I could check the county records, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
Does anybody in the audience wish to address this building? Okay, anything else? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
And Steve, one more point. I lost my thought. I can't remember what I was going to say now. I know I had something to go off.
You're too young to have that happen.
The timing or the,
If I think of it, I'll let you know. The other Third and Main building, I was
Oh.
just going to say, it would still be our intention to bring that agreement back if the council is going to be available, possibly a special meeting this week. We do have the court hearing scheduled for next Monday, so we're still hoping that we can bring that one back and have it in place and approved before the court hearing next week.
And if someone gets a chance, maybe we should find out John's information, because that'd be good to know when that building last traded hands and at what price. So at least we're aware of it, because we do know that the current owners did put some money into it. There's a newer roof, as you guys pointed out, and there's probably some other things that they did. Yes, yeah. So at some point, that'd be good information to have.
Okay. Action on Resolution R 2019-53, a resolution authorizing the execution terms, issuance, sale, and payment of sales tax revenue financing bonds in the aggregate principal amount of not to exceed $9,800,000 of the city of Mitchell, South Dakota.
This resolution would allow the city to refinance our community projects bonds that were issued in 2012. The end result of that would be a savings in interest that is about approximately $445,000. Now that's a conservative estimate, so it might actually go up when we actually lock in the rate. We have been looking at this for about a month or so now. We had some additional questions we were trying to get answered, which is why we didn't have it on the agenda for last meeting. But with those questions now being answered, we really see an urgency to want to get this done soon so that we can lock in the lower interest rate. There is a public notice requirement that we have to go through, and so this resolution will start that process for us. I did note in there that the reason why it is financially feasible to refinance those now is due to the changes in the bond rating. When the city went from an A+ to a AA-, that gave us access to better interest rates. I know, I think it was Dan who maybe had asked me previously, what would the finance savings have been on the wetland purchase due to that bond rating change? And I did have Toby Morris run the numbers on that one for me as well. And because of that upgraded bond rating, we saved about $300,000 of interest on that issuance as well. So between the two, that's a net savings of $745,000. I just want to reiterate that the reason why that bond rating changed is due to the changes the city has made in the way we're doing our financial management. We've changed our budget process. We now have a structurally balanced budget. We paid down some debt. The last couple TIFs that we've issued, we did so as grant pass-throughs, so they wouldn't go against our debt limit. And we were able to build our reserves with our budgeting changes that we've done over the last 4 or 5 years. So it really commend the council for those policy changes. It was kind of hard in those first couple of years, but there's just an example of net direct savings that the city realized due to the changes that we implemented.
And Stephanie, they're talking maybe interest rates going down next week. We're not going to be locked in right tomorrow.
No, we just have to get the resolution passed so we can get the process started, but they will lock them in at the lowest rate because they're watching the forecasted rate changes.
So there is a possibility we could be saving more in the future.
Yep, that's why I said this is probably the conservative estimate. At a minimum, they think we'll save at least this amount.
Perfect. Thank you.
Just, and one question, I looked at the principal outstanding, and if I add it up, it's 9.63 million, and we're doing not to exceed 9.8. Is there a reason for that difference?
I don't know why either. We only have ever done it for what we're reissuing, so probably
Is there
because
some, okay,
there's probably some variance depending on when you're actually paying off the bonds,
Okay.
because we wouldn't actually be issuing, I think you said
I
till
think-
September.
I think when we did one of these before, we had a
We did the same thing with the
$100,000 gap or
wetland,
something
and we didn't issue it for the full amount listed. It's just that's the maximum amount.
to make sure we
Yep.
have enough. Okay, that's,
Is that new math they estimated?
You will have to have your cost of issuance, Steve. You will have to include our
cost
cost
of
of issuance in the refinancing. That's how
Okay.
we've done. But the savings includes those
Costs
costs
also,
figured
okay.
into it. So that's still a net savings even with the cost of issuance included.
She's starting to read your mind. That's not good, Steve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. McCardle, second by Mr. Rice. Further discussion? Is there anybody in the audience that wishes
Great news.
to address it? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. We'll adjourn the special city council meeting. We'll turn it over to Councilman McCardle for work session.
All right, we'll start with the work session right now, and I'll turn it over to Stephanie, being Stephanie's done a lot of the work on this and knows the numbers and what we want to do here. So I'll have Stephanie explain that to us right now.
And today what we had intended or what we have planned is just a real basic overview to give everyone the same starting point on where we are with budget so that next week when council comes in to the work session, everybody's kind of got that same basis of information to start off of. I am going to probably change number 3 and 4's order around just because capital improvement plan projects are really included in this budget planning discussion that I put together. First of all, typically we have done a financial, hold on, I can't talk and run the mouse at the same time apparently. We've done a financial overview in the spring. We did use that work session to do a different, discuss a different project that the city was considering. So I'm just going to kind of run you through really quickly. I did also give everybody these slides as a handout so you can look at it in more depth. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But I just kind of want to give you a high-level overview of kind of where we're at as a city. As you know, every year we kind of look at building permits, how many were issued, and valuation as a indicator on how the community is doing as a whole. And here you can see the property valuation each year continues to go up, and then our levy goes down as a result of that. So the red line would represent the levy, and then the yellow bars are the actual property valuation within the city. And here you can see the property taxes collected and an annual amount. Again, state law limits that increase to CPI and growth. So those are the two ways that those taxes go up. And then this one on the right just shows you kind of a percentage change every year and where we're at. Lately, we've had much lower percentage increases, but that's largely due to there's been a very low CPI for those years. You will see there was a jump in from 2018 to 2019. I think when we look at this in 2020, you're going to see another jump as well because we have 2 TIFs that have now been added back into the tax roll, so that valuation will start to show within the city as well. This just kind of shows you a breakdown of where our general fund revenue comes from historically. You probably hear me say a lot that sales tax is always at the forefront of my mind because that really is the bread and butter of how the city does its general operations. Sales tax is how we fund our capital improvement projects as well as just general city operations, whether it's police, fire, public works, or the transfers that we do to the other funds like Park and Rec and those other ones as well. So you can see the yellow would be property taxes, red is sales tax, and green is the other revenue. And that's going to be our charges and fees that we do and fines and grant money and those kind of things. And then this is just the same information, but it's represented as a percentage. So if you look at 2019, 56% of our total revenue came from sales tax. It came down a little bit, but I think that that's largely because this other revenue went up and we had some other grants and financing that came into that budget period. You guys are seeing this on a monthly basis, so this is really no new information to you. It's just our sales tax collection. As you know, we started looking at quarterly projections. You can see kind of how the trend has changed in how much we collect in the different quarters of the year. It used to be 21, 21, 29, 29, and now you'll see it's kind of, our third quarter has picked up a little bit more. We currently have $250,000 earmarked in the 2019 contingency because we're still waiting to see how the local economy, especially with the ag losses, are going to impact our sales tax budget. So just to let you know, if you were to stop your budget year right now and look at how much we've received for the year versus budget, we'd be $6 million short. So, but that's halfway through the year too. So, based on what our trend of the last 4 or 5 years have told us, we should end flat for the year. And again, that's just sales tax numbers collected. This is the entertainment tax overview. Same information that I said before. We did note that in June was our lowest collection month, and well, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it was close to 10 years. It was at least 6 or 7 years. So June was pretty low for us. We're going to see how July ends. But even with that, we're only, you can see $460,000 from budget now, and our highest collections are in the third and fourth quarter. So we'll see how that ends. If you look at the trend data, it still shows that we'll, if anything, be about $45,000 short. But we were going to apply, or we were adding some cash into reserves if needed, so we can fund that if we do have a revenue shortfall.
Do you have any hypotheses about why June was low?
I'm hoping because the state didn't get us all the numbers they were supposed to, but that would not, I can't say that until we get farther into it. It's really kind of perplexing because when you talk to the CVB and to the gift shop next door, they say their numbers are up this summer. So I'm more anxious to see how the quarter as a whole performs and see if it kind of balances out or not. Same thing with the collection rates. Oftentimes we're asked, where does the city spend the majority of their money? This is just the breakdown by category. So you can see general government versus this one here is public safety, and then we've got public works, health and welfare. That's going to be animal control and some of our subsidy applications, culture and rec, and this one is economic development. Blue is debt service. And this one looks so big, this transfers out. That's the amount that we're transferring to other funds to support other operations. So it goes into special revenue funds like Corn Palace, Park and Rec, things like that. This just shows you your revenue versus expenses. Just to note that in 2016 was the first year that we kind of changed the way we were doing things, where we required a structurally balanced budget and we no longer were taking funds out of reserves to balance. So this grew that year, but that's because some of the projects that probably didn't get done, instead of just doing them during the middle of the year, we made them go through a process of rolling it forward to the next year. And then you can see enterprise operations as well. The line on this charts the line in these charts is actually the fund balance. And you'll see it tick up in 2017 and 18. We did change our water rate, if you remember, in order to start accumulating some funds to invest in these major infrastructure projects that we knew would be coming up. Part of that is so that we can afford that debt service payment.
Are we going to be behind on water funds this year on account of the wet weather we're having? Are we selling more water or less?
It looked, year-to-date looked, the budget was set low, so the year-to-date looked like we were fine with budget, actually, and we
Oh, really?
upped our revenue budget for that fund next year because it was too low.
Okay.
So, I guess one thing that we should probably bring up, and I've talked about this every year during budget. First, I should mention this too, actually. If you look at the park fund, I don't want you to think that this looks like they're operating in the hole every year. This negative is really reflecting the amount of the transfer from the general fund into Park and Rec fund, because they are not an enterprise operation. They do get money from general fund to operate. Same with E911. Oops, I went too fast, sorry. Community services, as you know, we've had a fund balance in there in the past. We've been spending that down the last couple of years, and I keep noting that at some point there's going to be a decision to be made about what we're going to do with that, trend in the future. Jessica does a phenomenal job in monitoring what she's spending to match with the grant funds coming in, but the grant funds haven't been as high as they have been in previous years either. This is interesting. We do spend a lot of time talking about our municipal debt, and this is just the begin. If you took all of our debt that's on the books or just recently paid off, this is the total here. Red is the general fund, then you've got water fund, sewer, sanitation, and then TIFs. TIFs should be this last one here. And you can see over the years how this is changing. Two things to note: the general fund debt coming down, because we've always talked about those projects that we've been spending off and waiting for those to be paid off. The TIF, where's this one? The yellow. You can see those TIF debt are starting to come down too, because we've had some of those TIFs coming off. And then the most recent, the last 2 years, the last two TIFs that we approved, Performance Pet and Vantage Point, we did those as pass-through grants, so those aren't going to show on here. And then you'll see the green took a big leap, and that is your water fund projects that we are, and your sewer should also, you'll see that going up here this year too. And that is the financing of Sanborn and East Central Drainage. And keeping in mind that the majority of those projects are being financed, all of East Central Drainage is coming out of the sewer fund because it's largely being attached back to that storm drainage improvement. And then that's also how we get those grant funds for doing the non-point source solutions with the Fire Steel watershed.
Can I ask you to go back to special revenue fund operations?
Yep. I'm here. Which one?
Next slide, I think. Right back one. There, the E911, and we had talked about our ambulance service and other
Yep.
stuff. Any
E9
ideas in the budget on?
E911, we did talk about quite a bit during, and that's separate from EMS.
Okay.
E911, we actually have those contracts coming up. I don't remember what she said now, 2020? 2020, they're up for renewal. So one of the things that we talked about in our department review is that we need to look at what those capital costs are and make sure that we're charging those other. So we're starting those conversations now.
Okay.
You can see the fund balance hasn't really changed too much, but the general fund contributions are in there as well. So.
Okay.
And then this is another good thing to look at. The burgundy color is your debt capacity. In 2015, we had about $13 million left. That has grown now to $25,794,000. That's part of the reason for that improved bond rating, is because we paid down some of that existing debt. That's why I keep saying that we have this magic 2020 year, because once we got to that point, we knew we were going to have built some room for additional financing for projects if needed. The yellow is that 10% capacity. Those are the ones with specifically pledged revenues. The new debt that we're issuing this year will be included in those amounts because they have a surcharge pledged to them. And then the last thing I just wanted to point out is, that's not the last thing. I got a couple more, sorry. We talk a lot about TIFs, and like I said, these last two TIFs were pass-through grants, so they don't show up against our debt. But I think it's important to point out that if you look at the equalized base value was $32,979,945, and then here's our assessed value after as of 2017. Because I don't think I've gotten this one updated with new numbers yet. But the growth as of 2017 equalized value, the increment growth, the additional value due to those TIFs is $47,497,150. So when I said that you're going to see some growth happening as these TIFs have fallen off, like here, this one's closed. Well, that 2020. I can't see that far with my glasses.
2020.
And 13 is 2020. So you're going to see some of those being added on. And we had a couple come off and get added back into the tax rolls for 2020 as well, 2019. So those are coming down now, and those new TIFs that we issued aren't going to impact that debt capacity, but it's still going to have growth, but we just haven't gotten those numbers from the state yet. And then we spent a lot of time talking about reserve balances, right? So I just wanted to show you 17 versus 18, and then what that change has been. So you can see general fund, we're flat at zero because we haven't been spending that reserve, right? We've been doing structurally balanced budgets now. We grew a little bit in entertainment tax. E911 was flat. Community services, we've been spending that down. We've talked about that. Nutrition actually grew a little bit. Water fund grew a little bit because we increased that water rate so that we can start doing more infrastructure projects. Sewer, airport sanitation went down, but that's because they purchased some capital out of their reserves. Corn Palace Fund, and there you can see, and health insurance fund is another one too. Billy is meeting with the insurance renewal people this month, but we are pretty close to being where our target was for having that financially funded at a level that made us feel comfortable as that self-funded plan. So that has grown. And if you remember in 14, when I first got here, you did 2 transfers of $300,000 from the general fund in the middle of the year into that account. So this account is financing itself now. And again, here's just the dollar amounts of the reserve balances. Again, when you look at a high balance in 16 and a lower in 17, that is likely because any additional projects that were unspent, we didn't just keep spending money that year. We designated through the supplemental appropriation process in the next year and spend it the next year. And then if you remember too, when we first started looking at what the percent reserves was, when back in 2014, we were at 11% reserves. And our goal was to get it up to 30%. They said at a minimum, 20% to be able to meet your obligations of payroll and stuff in the event of a downturn. And here you can see 31, 31, and 27%. So we're doing quite well. And at the end of the year, depending on where you end, if you end up designating some of those reserves or adding to it, it's grown a little bit every year. So that's just the basic financial overview. I also put together, let's see if I can find it, just really kind of a budget overview for you so you can kind of get an idea of what our starting, where our starting point is for the 2020 budget. So a couple things that we want to go through with you is really the department requested, where we started with budgets versus where we currently are with a proposed budget after we had our internal department reviews. We have our major projects outlined so that we can walk you through and you can get an idea of what's included in the budget and what isn't. And then if you have questions about those specific projects, we can answer those for you. And then just any of the major changes from last year to this year. Just a reminder about our upcoming dates. We have our overview today. Our big work session we have set for next week from 6 to 8. That's where we'll take more discussion on each of these items. And then we had another tentative one if it's needed before the August 5th City Council meeting. But our hearings, our public hearings on the budget are the 2 meetings in September. As you can see, this is where we started our budgets. We were starting in $15 million in the hole, which really didn't feel very great when we started, but The good news is that when we looked closer at some of those department requested, we did find that some of the revenue was missing. We had some projects that were included that we're going to be financing, and we had to have that revenue included as part of the budget. We didn't have the CPI factored into our property tax increase, so we added that. And then we also went through and some of those utility accounts that were bringing in more revenue that the budget showed, we increased those to reflect what we're actually doing. Then you can look at expenses. We're up to a $50 million proposed budget expense. And again, if you look at where we started, it's down about 1.8 million, and revenue went up, quite a bit there too. The expense changes were really made from the first thing we do is we go through and look at what the actual year to date and the 3-year averages are, and we bring those back down to what those numbers should be. We look for any requests in expanded services. We look for any new programming, and we take those out. We also make sure that any one-time funding requests that were included in department budgets from the previous years were removed. All the departments meet with the mayor one-on-one and go through capital requests, and so there's some additional reduction in those capital requests. And then all the subsidies applications that we received, all the applications we received this year were from previous subsidies. We didn't get any new applications, and those were all just put in at last year's level. We did have our subcommittee meet today, so I'll have those changes ready to present to you at the next meeting. The one thing I would point out is on your desk in your proposed budget book, the first pages that you're going to see shows the department requested and the proposed budget line by line. So any changes that were made in that budget are shown line by line with a note beside it saying why it was changed so that you can go and cross-check those departmental budgets. We also did apply quite a bit of cash from reserves, and this is not coming from the undesignated cash that we just looked at. This is coming from money that's set aside for a specific purpose and can only be used for that purpose. We have not used our state funds for any road projects the last couple of years because we did those financing of Sanborn. So we are proposing that we're applying some of those funds towards our paving and overlay and chip seal projects. And then you guys are well aware that you've been designating money for the 27th payroll for a couple of years. So we're taking that money that you had designated for that purpose and including that as cash applied, so it's not coming out of current operations.
Does that happen this year, or?
It is this year, 2020. Yeah. Good thing Michelle remembered that.
You guys been saving for it. Don't look so surprised.
I didn't think I'd be here that long.
So the difference is that council gets to start with a structurally balanced budget. And then that means that any changes you make, at least the budget you're starting with from departments is structurally balanced. Just a high-level overview of the major projects in the budget. Of course, we have the second half, actually, now we're on the second to third half of Sanborn. We did the first half, which was, Havens up to the bridge. Now we're working on 1st through 15th, but we bid both that entire project as one bid, but its construction occurs over 2 years. So the amount that we had in the 2019 budget was just for the amount we were going to spend in the 2019 budget. This amount would be the difference between the total project cost and what we're paying in 2019. And then you can see the paving and overlay, and Kyle did put together quite a comprehensive program. They're going to expand what they're doing, and I'll let him answer those questions for you. But like I said, those are being funded out of our state funds. So that is not coming from other general fund money. We're using state money to do that. We've got water tower replacement, daily lift station. Both of those items would have to be financed out of the utility accounts. Those would have been included in, at least the water tower replacement was included in that facility plan. So when we did our rate increase, we were anticipating financing those kind of things. And then the signal lights are replacing on Sanborn, right? Yeah. Good brain. Good job. Okay. Still functioning in hot weather. This is good. This is just the overview, like I said, of that phase 2 or 3 we did together. Joe put this together for us out of engineering department. You can see the total cost and then the breakdown by each of the funds. and how much we had budgeted and how much we have coming out of budget. And I must have had the wrong dollar amount on there, I apologize. I was looking at East Central Drainage. Okay, and there's your cost estimate for the second half of East Central Drainage. This one, I just kind of excuse me, temporarily added the financing in for sanitary sewer and the storm sewer. Our intention is to go after SRF financing for that, so that we can open up some more grant funds for the Lake Mitchell watershed area. If that is not possible, then we will use the TIF funds to fund that. We will not keep the debt for both the SRF and the TIF. We're going to do one or the other, but it just depends on the approval of the SRF financing. Here's an overview of that paving plan. Like I said, Kyle could answer the details for that for you. But those would be the 4 major streets that they'd be doing the improvements on. The Wisconsin and Quinn Street, the $50,000 is the city cost. I did just note that assessment cost because that's obviously not the full cost of the project as a whole. Chip seal, and Kyle, I think we said we're going to do 20 more blocks, is that right, of chip sealing? So it's additional work than what we've done before, but again, we're using STIP funds for that. The other thing to mention with the paving plan is, I know in the past, we've had concerns about how much we're putting on our project plan because we can't seem, we're relying on commercial asphalt or another vendor to come in and get that done. Kyle has said their intention is to go out early and get on the schedule early in the construction year versus waiting till the end so that we can get to all the projects. So they feel confident that we'll be able to get all of them included. And I guess the good thing is because we're using STIP money, we're not offsetting something else we would have been doing in the general fund. This can only be used for roads maintenance. So, and then you can see the sidewalks. Parking lots, we originally had $100,000 for parking lots. This doesn't have other funding sources, so we did dial that back down, and we only now have the Corn Palace Plaza parking lot in there, just because of the amount of other paving projects we have going on for 2020.
Which one is that?
Corn Palace Plaza,
Over here.
the old Northwestern parking lot. We renamed it.
Okay, that's nice to know.
And then obviously the utility improvements, and, we're still waiting, at least I haven't seen the results of the water distribution study that we were looking at, or the sewer facility plan study. I would assume when we get to that point, we're probably going to want to have a work session to go through that in more detail with council, but that would be the two major, we have all the CIP replacement and all the, they fix valves every year, but these are the major cost ones for the 2020 budget. And then 2 other things just that would be different from what you've seen in previous years. We have moved EMS, the Emergency Medical Service, over to an enterprise fund. There's several reasons for doing this. So it's going to look different, and it's the last thing in your department requested budget. We put the new funds in, and we put the general fund budgets from previous years in there as well. The reason for doing this is they are charging a service for that.
Mary,
Sorry.
can you talk to us about it?
I will.
Oh, okay.
If you want me to, but go ahead. Yep, I'll fill in any blanks. Yep,
Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
sorry.
We switched it to an enterprise fund because we want to be able to show the actual cash coming in and the expenses that we're doing. Right now in the 2020 budget, to make that balance, we are showing a transfer out of general fund of $882,000. That's the same amount that we showed last year, but the difference is now we have to actually physically move that money out of general fund into this enterprise fund. It's going to give us some opportunities for better reporting. We're going to be able to show that with project accounting when the different years are being, the revenue is being received and spent and expended. The other item that will be an improvement is, and maybe that's what Mary's got up to talk about, I'm not sure, but we'll be able to show additional, since we're showing a loss, we can potentially get additional reimbursement from Medicare.
Right, yep. So that's where a lot of this talk started. So soon after I got this position, I sat down with Steve and several other people, and we had quite a frank talk about where we were sitting with the budget. And what I've found over the last year is that our budgeting amount is kind of a, for lack of a better word, kind of a crapshoot, because we never know exactly what that amount's going to be. This will help us delve down a little bit more exactly on how to budget. Plus, the federal government in 2020 is going to do a really deeper look into Medicare and Medicaid and the restructuring of that and the payouts of that, and what that's going to do with EMS, and I foresee this coming, is more treatment at home, more community paramedic type things, not inundating the ERs with all these different things. So I think there's a lot of stuff that's coming. Changing this to an enterprise fund will help out a lot. With that, with, like I said, with the cost accounting, as Stephanie said, and then different work projects. Because right now, we could receive a check from a payment on a call or a run that we did back in 2010 that somebody's paying $5 on. And this will allow us to, allow us to say, we're taking money in 2010, 2011, whatever it might be. Right now, it just goes into one pot, right? So I'm really excited about this. Said nobody ever, but I am actually, I'm actually really excited about this. It'll actually give me a really good idea on a lot of different fronts, right? Are we really losing money? Our revenue shows up for June, if you've seen those numbers at all.
The collections are up.
The collections are up, yep, sorry.
Which
So-
our collections were down for the
Yeah.
last 2 years, much lower than what they had been the previous 5 years.
Right, so do we have too many personnel on the EMS side? Do I need to balance it out because we split them in half? So I think a lot of this will help out, plus it'll generate its own fund for different things down the road that we can look into, so.
And the only other thing that I was going to note was we've been approached, as you are aware, by other entities looking at EMS services. Our intention is to hold off on adding any additional services outside of the city limits until we can get a better handle on how this service is operating and what the city costs of operation are before we set pricing for other entities.
Any other?
Great.
Yep.
Fantastic news.
And then, like I said, with community services, I alluded to that a little bit in the financial overview. We have seen, and if you look at this sheet here, and Jessica's not here tonight because she had another commitment, but if you look at this sheet here, this will be the first year that we're actually going to be contributing general fund dollars to that operation. And after the budget reductions, we're at $241,981 from general fund needed balance. So she did go back through and make quite a few changes. There were some grants that they weren't going to apply for because they're not really happy with the product anyways. We did eliminate one full-time transit driver that they've kept vacant for a number of years but haven't filled. We eliminated that position and the benefits tied to it. And just, she really cut back on where she could within the budget. But this board will have to have a conversation about how do you want to continue this into the future? I've brought it up the last couple of years during budgeting that you're going to start having to put general fund money into this, and at what level do you want to be funding it?
So this will give us the opportunity to put it into a enterprise fund and look at that. And
That's in a special revenue fund,
Just
so it's
revenue
always
fund?
been set aside, but it's the first time we've had to spend
okay,
general
and
fund money
so
on it.
we have transportation, we have the food service, we have, what else is?
The ones that come out of community service would be JVCC,
Yep.
on the Mitchell Volunteer Program, and Palace
Volunteer
Transit.
program.
Senior nutrition is in its own
By
operation.
itself,
and
it
it's
won't be included?
No,
It's
because
not?
that one is
Okay.
actually, that one covers its.
Covers itself,
Yep.
but, okay.
I really think even since she started doing those take-home meals, it's been really
even
good
been
for that.
better.
Yeah, so,
Profitable.
yep.
Okay.
That would be, I did have an opportunity for additional discussion that council might have. There's one other item that I just want to point out to you that would be like page 4, I think, in your book. I didn't bring mine in here. It'd be right after the changes in the department requested versus provisional budget. And this one will show you, that's not a good way to do this. Hold on. it'll look like a spreadsheet, and what you're looking at here is it's going to show you all of the capital requests from all of the departments. You'll see, I'm going to make this bigger because I'm blind. Hold on. Oh, well, that's good. It's not just me. So you'll see the category of improvement it is, what the project is, a description.
The capital tab?
Yep, and it has a tab on it. This is capital improvements. The department, the division. The two things that I know council will want to see is that the request is what the department requested. This next column in proposed budget, that's what's left. And if you look down that list, you had, well, let's do this.
Page 4 of
$2 million cut out of capital requests. So there's, the main things that are left are those main projects that I overviewed earlier with streets and Sanborn and East Central and the utility projects. Most everything else has already been taken out. The mayor removed all the vehicles. A lot of the equipment was reduced. A lot of the other building improvements were requested to be moved to a future date. So I just want to make you aware of that, so when you come into your budget discussions next week, you come in knowing that this last column is in the overview I already presented to you. So if you're adding that stuff back in, that takes you away from that structurally balanced, and that's where you got to find the difference. Does that
Looks
make
like most of this is in infrastructure.
It is,
A lot of the
actually,
budget
almost everything
items are,
is.
yeah.
There's some machinery and equipment that was left in, but and we'll go through that in detail at the next meeting, but I just wanted to make sure I'm showing you guys where it is, so as you're reviewing your budget materials for our work session, you know where to go and look.
Kyle, quick question, and just popped in my head when I saw the water tower $3 million replacement. Does that include the demolition of the Burr Street, or is that demolition in current budget or something?
Yeah, so we're estimating a 1 million gallon tank, and anything smaller than that would, I think, bring the price down a little bit, but it would include the demolition of the tank.
Of the current.
And some of the infrastructure where we're moving it from Burr over to Kimball, is that right? Yeah, where the disco lot is. So some of the infrastructure connecting the new tower as well is included in that 3 million.
Oh, okay.
So is that similar to the size that's on the interstate, or is that one bigger?
And that was.
It's the same one on the interstate.
That's what.
But
I
a
was
different
gonna ask
style.
of
I mean,
what I want to call it, the architectural look of that one being in downtown versus the
Well, we
style.
looked at a corn cob, we looked at a dome like the Corn Palace.
yeah, and that'll be part of the design that we go through on.
Because we might want to make it look like it fits better than the
Yeah.
interstate version, but I don't know. That's-
Right.
I had that thought when, if we were going to put it back next to the Performing Arts Center, that it should look different, but great idea to move it away from there so it doesn't cloud that line of sight up, but.
In my understanding, the reason why the disco lot is a good location is there's a major line that goes in that area now.
Okay, that's
Yeah, it's right
probably too
outside
much
of-
detail for this discussion, but thank you. We can get into that next week.
We can get as fancy as you want on that.
Yeah. only-
As long as you
only
stay
time-
under
only
$3
time
million.
and money, right?
Right.
And again, that's going to be a financed project. Obviously, we can't come up with $3 million, but the water rates that we set assumed we would be going out and financing that project, so our current revenue can make that debt service payment to get that done. So that's the overview. Now we can answer any questions you guys have.
I'm just ecstatic on the EMS and community services information. That makes my night. Thank you.
And I do just want to commend council one more time that with the changes that you have implemented in this budgeting process, that's the reason why we're saving $775 on those other finance projects, because the city is in a much better financial position now than we were in 2014. And that's even with flat and lowered sales tax growth within the last 5 years.
So what do we have to do to get from AA minus to AA or triple
I
A?
asked that question because I think Alan asked me that question. And the response that I got is it'd be very difficult for a community our size to ever get to that level, because part of the things that you get judged on is what's the economic opportunity of your community and the average wages and things that really larger municipalities are the ones that are going to be able to do that. Although, because I'm super curious and kind of a nerd, I did go on to Standard & Poor's website and started looking at who were some comparable AA-, and there's states and large cities that we're above now. So just keep that in mind, that we're at and above some of those other states and large cities. So of course they're in probably financial trouble because they have a bigger pool that they can pull from even. But still, the point is that
California.
it's still a good move for us. And my understanding, going from an A+ to a AA- is actually a significant jump. It's not just like, it's not like our grading system, but that was a pretty significant jump for us.
I think credit ought to be given to Stephanie and city staff for what they have done to get us to where we're at, too. Thank you.
That's true.
That's right.
That's all I have for you today. And then you got tons of reading material to take with you for next week.
I was going to ask you, Stephanie, it's really worked out well with the structurally budget that we have, balanced budget. And what's different now than it was years ago is we've got a contingency sitting there, and it's close. Last year was close to 850, and if I reading the numbers right, that's about where you're at this year. And as things happen in a city, like anywhere else in your household, there's surprises throughout the year. So this way, we're at least able to afford them and pay for them. And even like our sales tax this year that we had taken $250,000 out, we're kind of staying even Steven. It's going to be holding our breath to the end of the year, but it'd be nice to bring some of that back in when we get closer to the end of the year. But at least it's too early to make that call right now.
Yep.
But the mowers blow up out at the golf course, and we get them, and the other projects that you guys have seen throughout the year. And I'm glad to hear that we're close to that number that we started with last year too.
And
Yeah,
when
we
the
are.
July storm and we're able to clean up.
There you go.
Or AC goes out and we
There you
get
go.
it fixed. So, yeah, we have kept the contingency at that level. In the past, when we haven't fully depleted that contingency is when council has used earmarking for specific purposes, whether it was the 27th payroll, things like that. It's also allowed us to grow that fund balance a little bit, and that's how we got away from that 11% and closer to the 30% goal line, so. Any other major questions on projects? I just want to make sure everyone has a good understanding of where we're starting and what we have currently included in the budget. No?
It looks very good.
And that's all I had for you, Mr. Chairman.
I don't know if anybody else has any questions, but I think it shows that working together as a team, you get a lot done in a hurry, because I wasn't here before, and Jeff tells me that they lasted a lot longer than an hour before, in years past, so. I think working together helps a lot, and having good people in hand, and we'll go to see what happens next week.
Next
We're
week,
adjourned until next week.
What will be going on next week again?
Next week, what I would anticipate is I will post to the agenda, to the work session agenda, your capital, so you can see that. Typically, you've wanted to review that.
Sure.
You've wanted to look at your subsidy requests, and then you'll have had a chance to go through all your departmental budgets, so I'll leave the third item just to be council items brought by council.
So capital subsidy request and
Other items brought by council.
Okay.
Just go right down the line and go through
Yep.
them, probably.
Good, very good.
We're adjourned then, huh?